I never thought a dinner at Romano's Steakhouse would change my life, but then again, I never expected some punk valet to total my ride either. Let me back up and tell you this story from the beginning, because what happened that night in downtown Phoenix still gives me chills. My name's Marcus Thompson, and I've been rolling around in a wheelchair for the better part of 15 years now. Lost the use of my legs to an IED outside Fallujah in 2009, along with a good chunk of my left hip and some shrapnel that the docs at Walter Reed decided was better left alone than dug out. Some people look at me and see tragedy, but I see it different. I see a guy who came home when a lot of good men didn't, and I've spent every day since trying to make that mean something. The car that got me into this whole mess wasn't your typical wheelchair-accessible vehicle. Hell, it wasn't typical anything. Most people took one look at it and figured I was driving some kind of Frankenstein contraption cobbled together in somebody's garage. They weren't entirely wrong, except the garage happened to belong to NASA's Johnson Space Center, and the guys who built it had put satellites into orbit and rovers on Mars. You see, about 3 years after I got home from the sandbox, I got connected with this experimental program through the VA. They were looking for veterans with specific types of spinal injuries to test out some new technology they'd been developing for astronauts. The idea was that if you're going to spend 6 months on the International Space Station, you need to be able to control complex systems without relying on your legs, and some of the same principles could help guys like me navigate the world a little easier. The result was this beast of a machine that looked like someone had taken a Honda Pilot, gutted it completely, and rebuilt it from the ground up with space-age technology. From the outside, it looked pretty rough around the edges. The paint was this weird, matte gray that never quite looked clean, and there were all these sensors and antennas sticking out of it that made it look like some kind of military surplus vehicle. Which, in a way, it was. But the inside was pure science fiction. Instead of a driver's seat, there was this custom pod that I could wheel my chair directly into. The whole thing would lock me in place and connect to my chair through these magnetic clamps that could hold me steady through a rollover. The steering, acceleration, braking, everything was controlled through this system of touch screens and hand controls that were so sensitive I could parallel park with a precision that would make a driving instructor weep. The really wild part was the navigation system. This wasn't your grandmother's GPS. The car knew where every curb cut was, every accessible bathroom, every building with working elevators within a 50-mile radius. It could plot routes that avoided stairs, steep grades, or anywhere else I might run into trouble. And if something unexpected came up, it would reroute in real time. The night this whole thing went down, I was meeting my daughter Sarah for dinner. She'd just gotten promoted to partner at her law firm, and we were celebrating at Romano's, this fancy steakhouse downtown where you need to make reservations 3 weeks out, and the cheapest bottle of wine costs more than most people spend on groceries in a month. Sarah had insisted on paying, and since she was making lawyer money now and I was living on disability, I wasn't going to argue. I pulled up to the valet station around 7:30, right on time for our 8 o'clock reservation. The kid working the valet couldn't have been older than 22, all gelled hair and fake tan, wearing this burgundy vest that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. His name tag said Trevor, and he had that look in his eyes that said he'd already decided I didn't belong there. Trevor took one look at my car, and his face just scrunched up like he'd smelled something rotten. "Sir, I'm not sure we can accommodate that," he said, gesturing at my ride like it was something that had crawled out of a junkyard. "It's a car," I said, keeping my voice level. "You park cars, right?" "Well, yes, sir, but this—" He walked around the vehicle, making a big show of examining it. This doesn't look street legal. Are those antennas supposed to be there? And what's with all these sensors? It's street legal, I assured him. Fully registered and insured. Just needs to be parked like any other car. Trevor looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on my wheelchair. Look, buddy, no offense, but I don't think this thing belongs in our lot. Maybe you should find somewhere else to eat tonight. There's a Denny's about 6 blocks down that would probably be more appropriate. The suggestion hit me like a slap. Here I was, dressed in my best shirt and tie, holding reservations to a restaurant I'd been looking forward to for weeks, and this kid was telling me to go eat at Denny's because my car wasn't pretty enough for his precious valet lot. I have reservations, I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. My daughter's waiting inside. I'm sorry, sir, but I really can't take responsibility for this vehicle. It looks like one good bump would make the whole thing fall apart. That's when I made my mistake. Instead of calling the manager or making a scene, I decided to try to educate the kid. I started explaining about the NASA program, the experimental technology, how the car had been specifically designed for disabled veterans. But Trevor just stood there with this smirk on his face, like I was telling him about UFOs or Bigfoot. Right, he said when I finished. NASA, sure they did. He turned to his coworker, another kid about the same age with the same attitude. Hey, Chad, this guy says NASA built his car. Chad walked over, looked at my ride, and started laughing. Dude, that thing looks like it was built in someone's backyard. Look at all those wires hanging out. Is that duct tape holding that panel on? It's specialized mounting tape, I said, but they were already lost in their joke. Maybe we should call the men in black, Trevor said. Tell them one of their vehicles is missing. By this time, a small crowd had gathered. A couple walking past stopped to see what the commotion was about. A few other customers waiting for their cars started paying attention. I felt my face burning with embarrassment as these two kids turned me into their evening's entertainment. Look, just give me my keys back, I said. I'll find somewhere else to park. Oh, no, sir, Trevor said, his tone dripping with fake politeness. Romano's provides excellent customer service. If you insist on dining here, I'll park your vehicle. But I want you to know that if anything happens to it while it's in our care, that's between you and your insurance company. He walked around the car again, making exaggerated gestures like he was inspecting a piece of junk at a salvage yard. Is it going to leak oil on our clean pavement? Because we just had the lot resurfaced. It doesn't leak oil, I said through gritted teeth. And all these antennas, are they going to interfere with our radio system? Because we use walkie-talkies to coordinate the valet service. The antennas won't interfere with anything. Trevor held out his hand for my keys, but there was nothing respectful about the gesture. All right, sir, but I'm going to document the condition of this vehicle very carefully for insurance purposes. He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures, making sure to get every ding, every scratch, every piece of duct tape he could find. He narrated as he went, loud enough for everyone around to hear, documenting extensive body damage to the left rear quarter panel, multiple non-standard modifications to the roof structure, unidentified electronic equipment mounted throughout the exterior. Sir, what's this black box mounted under your bumper? It's part of the navigation system, I said. Uh-huh. And this one? He pointed to another sensor. Proximity detector. It helps with parking. Right. Parking. He said it like he was humoring a crazy person. And I'm guessing all this stuff is why your car looks like it belongs in a demolition derby rather than the lot of a 5-star establishment. Chad chimed in from behind him. Maybe we should park it around back with the delivery trucks, so it doesn't affect the restaurant's image. I felt something snap inside me. 15 years of dealing with people's assumptions, their pity, their casual cruelty, and I'd finally had enough. But before I could say anything, Trevor held up his hand. "You know what, sir? I've changed my mind. I don't feel comfortable taking responsibility for this vehicle at all. I think you should find alternative arrangements for your evening." "Alternative arrangements? Maybe you could have someone pick you up, call a cab? I'm sure there are services for people in your situation." The way he said situation made my blood boil, like being disabled was something shameful, something to be hidden away from polite society. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "I have reservations, and I'm meeting my daughter. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to move your vehicle. You're blocking access for our legitimate customers." That word, legitimate, hung in the air like a slap. I wasn't a legitimate customer. My car wasn't legitimate. My presence at this establishment wasn't legitimate. The crowd around us had grown larger. I could see people whispering to each other, some of them looking sympathetic, others just enjoying the show. A couple of guys in expensive suits were shaking their heads and checking their watches like I was making them late for something important. That's when Trevor made the decision that would come back to haunt him. "You know what, Chad? Let's just get this thing out of here so these good people can get on with their evening." "Trevor," I said, "I really don't think you should." "Sir, I'm a professional valet. I've been parking cars for 3 years. I think I can handle your little science project." He snatched the keys from my hand before I could stop him and walked around to the driver's side. The problem was my car didn't have a traditional driver's seat. There was no seat at all, just the docking platform for my wheelchair and the control systems mounted on swing-out arms. Trevor opened the door and stared at the interior for a few seconds, clearly confused. "Where's the seat?" "That's what I've been trying to explain," I said. "The car is specifically modified for wheelchair use. There's a whole procedure for starting it up and—" "I got this," Trevor interrupted. He looked around the interior, spotted what he thought was an ignition switch, and jammed the key into it. Nothing happened. He tried again, twisting the key harder. Still nothing. "Is this thing even running?" Chad asked. "It's electric," I said. "The startup procedure is different. You need to—" "Electric?" Trevor laughed. "Right. This rust bucket is electric. That's rich." He started pushing buttons at random. The navigation screen lit up, displaying a 3-dimensional map of downtown Phoenix with trajectory calculations scrolling along the side. The proximity sensors started beeping as they detected the crowd of people around the car. The climate control system kicked in with a soft whoosh. "Whoa," Chad said. "That's actually pretty cool." Trevor wasn't deterred. He found what looked like a gear selector and shoved it into what he thought was drive. The car's computer system immediately started flashing warning lights and displaying error messages across multiple screens. "Warning! Driver authentication required," announced a synthesized voice from the car's speakers. "Biometric scan incomplete. Manual override disabled for safety reasons." "What the hell?" Trevor muttered. He tried pushing more buttons, but the car's safety systems had locked him out. "How do you turn off all these alarms?" "You need to shut it down properly," I said. "There's a specific sequence." "I don't need you telling me how to do my job," Trevor snapped. He grabbed the steering wheel and tried to force the gear selector into park, then back into drive. The warning beeps got louder and more insistent. "Unauthorized access detected," the car announced. "Security protocol engaged. Contacting monitoring station." "Monitoring station?" Chad looked nervous now. "What monitoring station?" I tried to wheel myself closer to the car. Just let me shut it down properly. The security system is designed to—" "Stay back," Trevor ordered. "I've almost got it figured out." He didn't. What he had done was trigger the car's theft protection system, which was designed by the same people who built security systems for spacecraft. The steering wheel locked. The gear selector locked. Every control surface in the car became unresponsive except for the emergency shutdown, which Trevor couldn't find because he was too proud to ask for help. "Attention! Unauthorized operation detected. GPS coordinates transmitted to security dispatch. Estimated arrival time, 12 minutes. Security dispatch? Trevor was starting to look worried. What security dispatch? That's when he made his second critical mistake. Instead of swallowing his pride and asking me how to shut down the car properly, he decided to solve the problem with brute force. He put his foot down on what he thought was the accelerator. The car lurched forward about 3 feet and slammed into the concrete barrier that separated the valet area from the street. The impact triggered every safety system the car had. Airbags deployed, warning lights flashed, alarms blared, and the automatic emergency response system activated. "Collision detected," the car announced in its calm, synthetic voice. "Emergency services contacted. Occupant safety systems engaged. Please remain calm." Trevor sat there in the middle of the deployed airbags, looking like he'd just wrestled with a cloud. The front end of my car was crumpled against the barrier, steam rising from somewhere under the hood. Fluid, not oil but some kind of coolant for the electronics, was spreading across the pavement in a growing puddle. The crowd that had been watching the show suddenly got very quiet. Someone's cell phone started ringing, probably 911 calling them back to confirm the emergency. In the distance, I could already hear sirens. "Sir," Chad said quietly, "I think we might have a problem." Trevor climbed out of the wreckage, brushing airbag residue off his burgundy vest. He looked at the destroyed car, then at me, and I could see the exact moment he realized he might be in serious trouble. "It's just a fender bender," he said, but his voice had lost all its cockiness. "Insurance will cover it." I wheeled myself over to look at the damage. It was worse than a fender bender. The impact had crushed the front sensor array, destroyed the primary navigation computer, and probably damaged the custom mounting systems that held my wheelchair in place. But the real problem was going to be explaining to his insurance company exactly what he'd just destroyed. "Trevor," I said quietly, "you might want to call your manager." "Why? It's just a car accident. Happens all the time." The first police cruiser arrived before I could explain why this wasn't just any car accident. Officer Maria Santos got out and walked over to survey the scene. She looked at the wrecked vehicle, looked at Trevor standing there covered in airbag powder, and pulled out her notepad. "Anyone hurt?" she asked. "No, ma'am," I said. "Just property damage." Officer Santos walked around the car, taking notes. Like everyone else, she was clearly puzzled by all the modifications, the sensors, the antennas, and the computer equipment that was now sparking and smoking under the crumpled hood. "This is an unusual vehicle," she observed. "Custom job?" "You could say that." She was about to ask another question when a black SUV pulled into the lot, moving fast but not using sirens. 2 men in dark suits got out and walked directly toward us, flashing badges as they approached. "Agent Parker, FBI," the first one said. "Agent Williams, we need to secure this area." Trevor's face went white. "FBI? Why is the FBI here?" Agent Parker ignored him and walked over to me. "Sir, are you Marcus Thompson?" "Yes, sir." "We received an automated security alert from this vehicle about 15 minutes ago. Are you injured? No, sir. Just some property damage. Agent Williams was examining the wrecked car, taking pictures with a digital camera. How extensive is the damage to the navigation and communication systems? Pretty extensive, I'd guess. The whole front sensor array is destroyed, and I can smell electronics burning. Sir, Trevor interrupted, I don't understand what's happening here. It's just a car accident. Why are federal agents involved? Agent Parker turned to look at Trevor for the first time, and his expression was not friendly. Son, do you have any idea what you just crashed? It's just some guy's modified car. This modified car contains approximately $2 million worth of experimental technology developed under a classified Defense Department contract. The navigation system alone is worth more than most people make in a lifetime, and you just destroyed it because you were too arrogant to ask for help. The number hit Trevor like a physical blow. $2 million? That's impossible. Look at it. It's held together with duct tape. Agent Williams looked up from his camera. That's not duct tape, son. That's ablative thermal protection material, the same stuff they use on the space shuttle. That cheap-looking exterior is designed to protect about $800,000 worth of electronics and life support systems. 800,000? Trevor's voice was barely a whisper. The vehicle itself, Agent Parker continued, is one of 6 prototypes developed for disabled veterans under the DARPA Adaptive Transportation Initiative. Mr. Thompson here is part of an ongoing study to evaluate the technology's effectiveness in civilian environments. Officer Santos had been taking notes throughout this conversation, but now she stopped writing and looked up. So this is a government vehicle? It's Mr. Thompson's personal vehicle, but it contains proprietary technology that's considered sensitive for national security purposes. The automated distress signal that brought us here is designed to prevent this kind of technology from falling into the wrong hands. Trevor sank down onto the bumper of a nearby car, his head in his hands. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? You could have listened, I said quietly. I tried to explain, but you were too busy making jokes to pay attention. Chad, who had been silent through all of this, finally spoke up. Trevor, man, you need to call Mr. Romano, like right now. Who's Mr. Romano? Agent Parker asked. He owns the restaurant, Officer Santos explained. This is his valet service. He's going to want to speak with Mr. Romano about his employees' handling of sensitive government property, Agent Williams said. This incident will need to be documented and reported to several federal agencies. That's when the second wave of vehicles arrived. A fire truck, because the car's emergency system had reported a possible fire. An ambulance, because it had also reported a collision with possible injuries. And a tow truck from a specialized recovery service that apparently had some kind of contract to handle situations exactly like this one. The fire captain walked over to examine the damaged electronics and declared the vehicle safe but unrepairable. The paramedics checked me out and confirmed I wasn't injured. And the tow truck driver took one look at all the specialized equipment and shook his head. This is going to need to go to the NASA facility in Houston, he said. I don't have the clearance to take it anywhere else. NASA? Trevor looked like he was about to throw up. You really weren't kidding about the NASA thing. I really wasn't. Mr. Romano himself appeared at this point, drawn outside by the crowd of emergency vehicles in his parking lot. He was a short, round man in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit and looking extremely concerned about what this circus was doing to his restaurant's reputation. "What in the hell is going on out here?" he demanded. Agent Parker walked over and introduced himself, then gave Mr. Romano a very brief, very professional summary of what had happened. I watched the restaurant owner's face go through several different expressions as he realized that his valet had just caused a federal incident in his parking lot. "Trevor," Mr. Romano said when the agent finished, "you're fired." "Mr. Romano, I can explain." "You can explain to your lawyer and to your insurance company and to whoever else wants to sue you for being a complete idiot." He turned to me, and his demeanor changed completely. "Sir, I am so sorry. This never should have happened. Please, let me make this right." "It's not your fault," I said. "Your employee made some poor choices, but that's on him, not you. Nevertheless, Romanos takes full responsibility. Your dinner tonight is on the house, obviously, and we'll work with your insurance company to make sure you're fully compensated for this damage." Agent Williams looked up from his paperwork. "Sir, his insurance company is going to be the federal government. This will need to go through the Department of Veterans Affairs claims process." Mr. Romano's face went a little pale. "The federal government? How much are we talking about here?" "The vehicle itself was worth about $800,000, Agent Parker said. "The experimental technology brings the total to somewhere around $2 million, plus there will be costs associated with data recovery, investigation, and replacement equipment." I thought Mr. Romano was going to faint. $2 million? "That's just the immediate replacement cost," Agent Williams added helpfully. "Depending on how much data was lost when the computer systems were damaged, there could be additional costs to reconstruct the research that was stored in the vehicle's memory banks." By this time, word had spread through the restaurant, and customers were coming outside to see what was happening. I spotted Sarah pushing through the crowd, looking worried and confused. "Dad? What's going on? I was waiting at our table and I heard sirens." I quickly filled her in on what had happened. Sarah listened with the professional calm of someone who'd spent her career dealing with legal disasters, but I could see the anger building in her eyes. "Let me get this straight," she said when I finished. "This valet destroyed your car because he decided you didn't look like you belonged here?" "Sarah, it's fine. It was an accident." "Dad, this wasn't an accident. This was discrimination. This kid made assumptions about you based on your disability and your car's appearance, and then he ignored your explicit instructions because he thought he knew better." Agent Parker had been listening to this conversation with interest. "Ma'am, are you Mr. Thompson's attorney?" "I'm his daughter, and yes, I'm an attorney. I specialize in disability rights law." "Then you might want to know that this incident will be investigated by the FBI, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and probably the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Interfering with adaptive equipment for disabled individuals is a federal crime under certain circumstances." Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "I'm aware of the relevant statutes. In fact, I helped write some of them." Trevor, who had been listening to all of this with growing horror, finally found his voice. "Wait, this is going to be a federal case? I'm going to be charged with a federal crime?" "That depends," Agent Williams said, "on whether the investigation determines that your actions were motivated by bias against disabled individuals." "I wasn't biased. I just thought the car looked weird." "You told my father to go eat at Denny's because his vehicle wasn't appropriate for this establishment," Sarah said coldly. "You called him an illegitimate customer. You refused to accommodate his disability-related needs, and you destroyed his adaptive equipment while he was explicitly trying to help you avoid exactly this situation. I didn't know it was disability equipment because you refused to listen when he tried to explain it to you." Officer Santos had been taking notes through all of this. "Ma'am, would your father be willing to press charges for the destruction of property?" I looked around at the scene. The destroyed car, the emergency vehicles, the crowd of people. Trevor looking like his world had just ended. "I don't know if that's necessary." "Dad," Sarah said firmly, "it's necessary. This isn't just about you. There are other disabled veterans in this program, and they need to know that their equipment will be treated with respect." Agent Parker nodded. "She's right, Mr. Thompson. This technology is being tested in civilian environments specifically to help disabled veterans regain independence. If service providers feel they can discriminate against users with impunity, it undermines the entire program." Mr. Romano had been having a whispered conversation with another man in an expensive suit, probably his lawyer, who had apparently materialized from somewhere inside the restaurant. Now he walked back over to our group. "Mr. Thompson, I've just spoken with my attorney, and we'd like to offer a settlement to avoid any litigation. We're prepared to offer you $50,000 in compensation, plus covering all costs to repair or replace your vehicle." Sarah laughed. "$50,000 for a $2 million vehicle in a clear case of disability discrimination? I don't think so." "What would you consider fair?" Mr. Romano asked nervously. "I'll get back to you on that," Sarah said. "First, I need to see the extent of the damage and understand exactly what happened here. But I can tell you right now that this is going to cost you a lot more than $50,000. The tow truck driver had finished loading my wrecked car onto his flatbed. Before he drove away, Agent Williams walked over and sealed the vehicle with some kind of official tape, then handed me a receipt. "Mr. Thompson, you'll need this for the insurance claim. The vehicle will be transported to Johnson Space Center for damage assessment. They'll prepare a detailed report on what can be salvaged and what needs to be replaced." "How long before I get a replacement?" I asked. "That's going to depend on a lot of factors. There are only 6 of these vehicles in existence, and yours was the most advanced. It might be 6 months before they can build you another one." 6 months. 6 months of being dependent on other people for transportation, of having to rely on regular wheelchair-accessible vehicles that couldn't do a fraction of what my car could do. 6 months of being reminded every day that some punk kid's arrogance had stolen my independence. As the tow truck pulled away with what was left of my car, more people arrived on the scene. A reporter from one of the local news stations had heard about the incident on their police scanner. A representative from the VA who'd gotten called because of the security alert. And finally, a man in an Air Force uniform who introduced himself as Colonel Mitchell from the DARPA program office. Colonel Mitchell examined the scene, spoke briefly with the FBI agents, and then walked over to me. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry this happened. This is exactly the kind of incident we were hoping to avoid when we designed the civilian test program." "It's not your fault, Colonel. The car performed exactly as designed. The safety systems worked, the emergency response worked, the security protocols worked. The only thing that didn't work was the human element." "Nevertheless, this represents a significant setback for the program. We're going to have to review our security protocols and probably modify the training we provide to program participants." Trevor, who had been sitting silently on the bumper of a car for the past 20 minutes, finally stood up and walked over. "Sir," he said to me, "I need to apologize. I was completely wrong about everything. I made assumptions about you and your car, and I didn't listen when you tried to help me understand. I'm sorry." It was the first genuine thing he'd said all evening, but it was too little, too late. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but sorry doesn't fix the damage. I know, I want you to know that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was just being stupid." Sarah looked at him with the cold professionalism of a lawyer who'd seen a lot of people try to apologize their way out of trouble. "Your intentions don't matter as much as your actions," she said. And your actions tonight destroyed a piece of equipment that represents years of research and development, meant to help disabled veterans live independent lives. The news reporter had been setting up his camera while this conversation was happening, and now he approached with a microphone. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Jake Morrison from Channel 12 News. Can you tell our viewers what happened here tonight?" I looked around at the scene. The emergency vehicles, the federal agents, the crowd of people, the restaurant owner looking like he was about to have a heart attack. This wasn't how I'd planned to spend my evening, but maybe something good could come out of it. What happened here is a reminder that people with disabilities still face discrimination and ignorance, even in 2024, I said. But it's also a reminder that there are people working hard to break down those barriers and create new opportunities for independence. Can you tell us about your vehicle? I spent the next 10 minutes explaining the NASA program, the technology that had been destroyed, and what it meant for disabled veterans like myself. The reporter asked good questions, and I could see people in the crowd. Restaurant customers, valet attendants, passing pedestrians, listening with genuine interest. When the interview was over, Colonel Mitchell pulled me aside. "Mr. Thompson, that was well done. You turned a disaster into a teaching moment." "I've had a lot of practice dealing with people's ignorance about disability," I said. "Might as well use it for something positive. There's something else I need to tell you. Because of the circumstances of this incident, and because it's generated so much attention, my superiors have decided to fast-track your replacement vehicle. Instead of 6 months, we're looking at maybe 6 weeks. 6 weeks? And there's more. The new vehicle will incorporate some upgrades that were still in development. Better sensors, improved navigation, enhanced safety features. You're essentially getting the next generation of the technology." It was the first good news I'd heard all evening, but it still didn't erase the frustration and humiliation of what had happened. The crowd was finally starting to disperse, and the emergency vehicles were leaving. Agent Parker handed me his card and told me someone would be in touch about the investigation. Officer Santos gave me a case number for the police report. Mr. Romano asked again about a settlement, and Sarah told him her office would be in touch. Trevor walked over one last time before leaving. "Mr. Thompson, I know this doesn't mean much now, but what happened tonight changed how I think about things. I'm never going to make assumptions about people again." "Good," I said. "Maybe something positive will come out of this mess." Sarah and I finally made it into Romano's for dinner around 10:30. The restaurant had held our table, and Mr. Romano personally served us a meal that probably cost more than most people spend on food in a month. But I couldn't really enjoy it. Every few minutes I'd think about my car sitting on that flatbed truck, headed for Houston, and feel a surge of anger all over again. "Dad," Sarah said over dessert, "I want you to know that we're going to hold everyone accountable for what happened tonight. The valet, the restaurant, their insurance company, everyone who contributed to the situation." "I just want my car back," I said. "You'll get your car back. But more than that, you're going to get justice. What happened tonight was wrong on multiple levels, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The story had gone viral overnight. The news interview had been picked up by national media, and suddenly everyone wanted to know about the disabled veteran whose NASA car got destroyed by an arrogant valet. My phone started ringing again before I'd even gotten out of bed. It was Colonel Mitchell. "Mr. Thompson, you need to see the news this morning." I turned on CNN and saw my own face looking back at me from the television screen. The chyron read, "Disabled vet's NASA car destroyed by discriminatory valet." The story had everything the media loved: high technology, federal agents, disability rights, and a clear villain in Trevor the valet. But what surprised me was how the story was being framed. Instead of focusing on the destruction of expensive government equipment, most of the coverage was about the discrimination I'd faced and the broader issues affecting disabled veterans. My phone rang again. This time it was a producer from Good Morning America asking if I'd be willing to do a live interview. "I don't know," I said. "This is all pretty overwhelming." "Mr. Thompson, you have an opportunity to educate millions of people about the challenges faced by disabled veterans. That's worth something, isn't it?" She was right. If something good was going to come out of this disaster, it might as well be education and awareness. I spent the rest of the week doing interviews. Television, radio, podcasts, newspapers, everyone wanted to hear about the NASA car and the valet who destroyed it. But what they really wanted to hear about was the discrimination, the assumptions people make about disability, and the technology that was helping veterans regain their independence. Trevor, meanwhile, was having the worst week of his life. The story had identified him by name, and he was getting death threats from people who were outraged by his treatment of a disabled veteran. His social media accounts were flooded with angry messages, and according to the news reports, he was facing potential federal charges for interfering with adaptive equipment. I actually felt a little sorry for him. He'd made a stupid, arrogant mistake, but he didn't deserve to have his life destroyed over it. That's when I got a call from his mother. "Mr. Thompson, this is Linda Morrison, Trevor's mother. I know you don't have any reason to listen to me, but I'm begging you to please consider showing some mercy to my son." "Mrs. Morrison, I'm not the one pressing charges. This is a federal investigation now." "But you could ask them to go easy on him, couldn't you? He's just a kid. He made a mistake." "Your son didn't just make a mistake," I said. "He discriminated against me because of my disability, destroyed $2 million worth of equipment, and caused a federal incident. Those aren't the actions of someone who just made an innocent error in judgment." "I know, you're right. But he's learned from this. He really has. This whole experience has changed him." I thought about that conversation for a long time. Had Trevor really learned something, or was he just sorry he got caught? And more importantly, what would serve the cause of disability rights better, showing mercy or making an example? The answer came 2 weeks later, when I was doing a radio interview about the incident. The host asked me what I thought should happen to Trevor, and I found myself talking about forgiveness and second chances. "Look," I said, "what Trevor did was wrong, and it had serious consequences. But if we're going to change attitudes about disability, we need to be willing to forgive people when they make mistakes and learn from them. The goal isn't to destroy people's lives, it's to help them become better." After the interview, I called Sarah and told her I wanted to ask the prosecutors to consider a plea agreement that would involve community service rather than jail time. "Dad, are you sure about this? This guy humiliated you in front of a crowd of people." "I'm sure, but I want the community service to be specific, working with disabled veterans, learning about adaptive technology, maybe speaking at schools about disability awareness. Make him part of the solution instead of just another casualty." 3 weeks after the incident, I got my new car. It was beautiful. The same basic design as the original, but with improvements I couldn't have imagined. The navigation system could interface with traffic control systems to optimize routes in real time. The sensors could detect obstacles and hazards that were invisible to the human eye, and the whole system was integrated with emergency services in a way that would prevent the kind of confusion that had happened at Romano's. Colonel Mitchell came to Phoenix personally to deliver the vehicle and train me on the new systems. "Mr. Thompson, This car represents everything we've learned from the program so far, including the lessons from your incident. It's probably the most advanced civilian vehicle on the planet." "What's it worth?" I asked. "We're not even calculating cost anymore. This is one-of-a-kind technology that will eventually help millions of disabled people around the world. You can't put a price on that." The first place I drove it was Romano's. Mr. Romano came out personally to greet me, and this time the treatment was very different. He walked me through the restaurant's new policies for accommodating disabled customers and their equipment. He introduced me to the new valet staff who had all been trained on disability awareness and adaptive technology, and he showed me the plaque they'd installed near the entrance dedicated to supporting disabled veterans. "Mr. Thompson, what happened here was unacceptable, but it taught us all something important. We never want anything like this to happen again." Trevor wasn't there, of course. He was spending his weekends at the VA hospital, helping disabled veterans learn to use new technology and adaptive equipment. It was part of the plea agreement Sarah had negotiated: 2 years of community service, disability awareness training, and regular reports to a federal probation officer. I ran into him there one day about 2 months after the incident. He was helping an elderly veteran learn to use a new voice-controlled wheelchair, and he was incredibly patient and respectful. "Mr. Thompson," he said when he saw me, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I come by sometimes to help with the technology training program," I said. "How are you doing?" "Better. Different. This work, it's taught me things I never knew about what people go through." "Good. That was the point. I want you to know that what happened that night, it wasn't really about your car or your disability. It was about me being insecure and trying to look important in front of the customers. I took that out on you, and that was wrong. I appreciate you saying that. And I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for it. Not just the community service, but really making sure I treat people better." A year later, Trevor started college, majoring in biomedical engineering with a focus on adaptive technology. He sends me updates on his progress, and he's working with the same DARPA program that built my car. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up becoming the strongest advocates for change. The Romano's incident became a case study in disability rights law schools across the country. Sarah used it as the foundation for new legislation that strengthened protections for adaptive equipment, and the publicity led to increased funding for the NASA program, which has since helped hundreds of disabled veterans regain their independence. But the most important thing that came out of that night wasn't the legal precedents or the policy changes or the media attention. It was the reminder that every interaction we have with other people is an opportunity to either build bridges or tear them down. Trevor chose to tear them down, at least initially. But he also chose to rebuild them when he had the chance. As for me, I still drive my NASA car every day. It gets curious looks, and sometimes people ask questions about all the sensors and antennas. But now I see those questions as opportunities rather than challenges. Every conversation is a chance to educate someone about disability, about adaptive technology, about the capabilities of disabled veterans. And every time I park that car, I think about the night at Romano's and how one young man's arrogance turned into a teachable moment for an entire country. Sometimes the worst nights of our lives end up being the most important ones. The car still doesn't look like much from the outside. It's still got that matte gray finish and all those sensors and antennas sticking out of it. People still sometimes assume it's some kind of jury-rigged contraption put together in someone's garage. But now I don't mind the stares and the questions as much, because I know that inside that ungainly exterior is technology that represents the best of human ingenuity and compassion. Technology designed specifically to help people like me live the fullest lives possible. And every time someone asks me about it, I get to tell them the story of how a moment of discrimination turned into a catalyst for change. How a valet named Trevor learned to see past his assumptions. How a restaurant owner learned to value all his customers. How a daughter's love for her father led to stronger protections for disabled people everywhere. It's a good story. It's a story worth telling. And it's a reminder that even in our worst moments, we have the power to choose redemption over resentment, education over anger, and hope over despair. That's worth more than any car, no matter how advanced the technology inside it might be.